Not sure if... Okay, I have a viewer waiting. It's streaming yet. Okay. I think I'm already live. I don't know if I don't have any body. Okay, I'm live already. Nice. Don't think there's anyone here yet. Okay. So, I don't know if I have anyone on here. Can't even tell if... Alpha, I want to send a link to you so you join and let me know if my screen is up. Okay, it's up, but make sure that my microphone... Yes. Okay. I don't think I have any viewer up here. Either way, I'm still gonna teach. So last week I introduced... Okay, so last week I introduced HTML, talked about the basics of web development, and I talked about HTML. In this class, I'm going to be talking about HTML, and I'll kind of delve into CSS. Yeah, so I talked about HTML, that it's a markup language, and HTML is made up of tags, because that's what markup languages are made up of. And I don't know if I'm loud enough. Let me try to see here on the stream. Alpha, I want to send a link to you so you join and let me know if... Okay, yeah, I'm audible. So we talked about the HTML tag. We talked about doc type HTML that basically informs the browser that the file that it's to render is a HTML file. It's a HTML document. So the document type is HTML. That's basically what doc type HTML means, right? We talked about HTML, we talked about the head tag, we talked about the title tag, which is right here on my screen. I'm gonna zoom this in so it's clear. Yeah, okay. So we talked about the HTML tag, the head tag, the title tag, we talked about the body tag, then we talked about the heading tags, where we talked about the 6 heading tags that HTML has. Heading 1 to heading 6, so H1 to H2, H3 to H6. Then we talked about the paragraph tag. We talked about the img tag, which I actually did not completely demonstrate. I'm going to do that here in this video and in this class. We talked about the list tag, where we talked about ordered lists, list item, unordered list and all. Then we talked about the anchor tag, which is basically the tag that helps you to link one page to another page. We talked about tables, forms, buttons. So what is going to happen in this class today? I'm going to be moving super fast. I'm assuming that the resources I shared last week, some of you went through them, and that would basically help you understand the areas of HTML that I'm going to touch today, because as it's not ideal, of course, but I need to finish HTML today. So I'll start talking about CSS, just introduce CSS at least. Then in our next class, we'll talk about CSS in detail. I will spend like 3 weeks talking about CSS. I would prefer for this class to hold more often than it already does, because now it's just once a week, but unfortunately I can't do that right now. But what I'm going to do, I'll just try to keep up with the Saturdays. If I can add another day within the week, that would be awesome. But now that we have Saturday, let's just deal with it. Okay. So I'm going to build a web page in this class. I'm going to build a web page, and it's going to be let me think about this for a second. I think if time permits, we'll build 2 web pages. We'll build one which will be a registration form, and then we'll build another one which would be kind of like a gallery. Yeah, I think that would be nice, kind of like a gallery. It's not going to have the structure. It will have the structure in HTML, but it's not going to have the design, because we are going to style those pages with HTML down the line. So okay, for our login page, we'll be focused on the form tag. So the form tag, we all fill forms online most of the time. Most websites have forms where you put a form. Is basically a layout that has inputs. So you can type your name, your email, whatever, for data collection. Use form to collect data, right? So since we are going to be building a registration page, we'll use the form tag. The form tag has other tags that are supposed to be used within it. So just so we have kind of like what would I say? Let's just say, just so we have kind of like a guide, I'll look for a registration form online right now, and I guess we'll have to use that. Let me think. Let's say let's registration form. Okay, let's just look for something random. Oh, this looks really fancy, but to take a lot of CSS, this looks simple. Okay, I think this looks good enough. First name, last name, blah 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 blah. Let's see if you can find something else real quick. You know what? I think this design looks good. We don't necessarily need to follow it to the letter, but we can just adopt the structure. So let me open this up in another page, another tab, so we'll have a better look. Of course, it took me to the main website. 1 second. Open image in new tab. Okay. Yeah. So this is just a basic registration form, and we might not necessarily copy this design, but this will give us an idea of the structure we will be looking at, right? Now, I want to explain how we are going to go about this, and I'll do that on Canva. So we can basically do what we can do a whiteboard, so I can highlight some areas for better understanding. I'm going to attach a file here, which, okay, let me download this image, save, and I'm going to import it here on Canva. You don't have to use Canva, but I use Canva. I do a bit of design, but not just playful design, not professionally. So I do a bit of design, and I basically use that to play around. I use Canva to play around sometimes. So this is what we are going to just quickly work on with HTML. Why am I putting this on Canva? I want to explain HTML structure and how you can lay something, like how you can basically build a layout. If you understand how to structure your HTML properly, know which tag should go into the other, it will help you to look at the design and you know exactly how to structure it without looking anywhere, without doing any research, right? I do this a lot, because working as, if you are going to design a web page, most of the time a designer would provide you with a design on Figma or something. As a professional, you're supposed to look at it and know exactly what to do, right? You need to know the exact thing, that exactly how you're supposed to structure the page so it looks exactly like what is on Figma, right? For those of you that don't know what Figma is a design tool that product designers use to design screens for websites and mobile applications, basically software design, right? And if you are an absolute beginner, a designer would basically make a design, something like what you are looking at on the screen here, and the developer will look at that design and use it as a guide to build the software to look exactly like what the designer made, right? So looking at this form, it's really basic actually, and I'm going to be using my pen here to illustrate the areas and what they are. So this purple like gradient with blue background that you're looking at, we are going to use a div tag. This area here, we are going to use a div tag. A div tag is used for layouts. A div tag is used for layout, right? So when you are building layouts, you use div tag. This here is our form. This basically this entire card here, it's a card actually. It's a card and it has like a shadow, so it looks like it's lifted off the background. So this we can make this a form. Let me see. You can either make it a div or a form. I don't have a tablet, so pardon my handwriting. Else I would have used like a pen or something. And this is obviously an input. So this element here is an input. This is an input, this is an input, this is an input, but they are of different types. First name and last name are input tags or input elements of type text. Last week I talked about HTML tag attributes. Every HTML tag has attributes that basically help describe what the tag is supposed to do or look like. We are going to get to that, but I'm just giving you kind of like a background so you understand. So the type attribute of this input is called text, because what it's supposed to take in is a text, right? This too will take in text. This is obviously an email, so there's a type of input called email where that expects an email, and if you don't pass an email, it will know you did not pass an email, so it will flag you, and I'll show that here too. This is a password. The type of input in HTML, password. If you use the type password, whatever the person types in the input, it will not show that the value, so because the password, so it will hide it. We are going to do that. This here is a checkbox. This is a checkbox. This is a normal, this is a label, and this is a button. So let's get to the juice of things. Let's get to the width. I got to the wrong, so that was the wrong screen. Pardon, let me drag this over here. Yeah. Okay, so let me quickly, I think I'll clear this and start from the beginning for the benefit of those that did not do any reading. Doc type HTML and HTML. If you are using VS Code, when you write a tag that has a closing tag, it will help you close it, right? So our head and the title here will be registration form. Body, like I said, the body tag is supposed to take in the content of the page, while the head tag is supposed to take in details of the page, things that describe the page, like the title. So I'm going to save this and I'll click go live. Last week I talked about live server extension on VS Code, so I believe those of you that have been following me, you already have this installed. So clicking on go live will open this page on the browser, and it's empty right now, but if you look here, you see registration form at the top. I'm going to zoom into, can I zoom? Gosh, I don't know if I can, but I guess you guys can see. I don't know if I can zoom. Let me see if I can zoom move zoom this screen. I don't know if my laptop will allow me to do that. Okay, just so we don't waste our time here, I'm going to figure that out after this class. Maybe in our next class, I'll look for a way to zoom so you see the tab closer. So if you look closely, you see registration form here at the top, and the page is empty because we've not actually written anything. So in our body, as discussed, as we've identified from Canva here, you see this is going to be a div tag, right? So inside the body, we are going to create a div tag. A div tag is not self-closing, so it has an opening and a closing tag. So this div tag is going to contain the entire layout. It will contain the entire layout of the registration form. And before I proceed, there's something I just quickly want to touch on. It's very, very important. So those of you that are starting out, it's important that you understand this concept. Now, I believe the goal of learning how to build web applications is to actually build web applications at the end of the day, right? So in that case, you have to work with one person or the other while you are in this process, right? So let's say you take on a project and it's so massive you cannot work on it alone. Most of the time you not work alone, and you need to work with someone else or a couple of people. So you probably need to work in a team, right? In an ideal situation, you have to work in a team. That means you need to learn how to work with other people. One of the most difficult things with working in a team is not even communication or stuff like that. On the technical level, right, it's the code. The code turns out to be a problem because everybody writes code differently. Everybody does their thing the way they want to. That's why when you work in a team, it's very important to have a set of standards that you guys follow, so that when Moses or whoever your teammate is sick, you can go back to the code that Moses wrote and change something, because you look at the code and you read it and you'll be able to understand it. But if Moses wrote the code in such a way that it's only Moses that can understand it, then you have to wait for Moses to get well before you can make modifications, or Moses has to be the one to make the modifications, right? So it's very important. And where I'm heading to with this is I want to show you guys how to write comments in HTML. Comments are important, especially if you have a lot of lines in your file or your code, whatever. You need to sometimes highlight areas of your code that even yourself will have to look at to remember exactly what that section does. So commenting code is not just for your other teammates, it's for yourself, your future self, because when you are working on a lot of things, sometimes you forget something and you just write it there, right? But if you left a comment, you know exactly what it does without having to read through the entire code. To write comments in HTML, for those of you using Windows, this is kind of like a shortcut. So Control // so Control // is the slash that basically faces forward like this. And for those of you using Mac, it's Command // so if I type Command // this here is a comment in HTML. The opening angle bracket, exclamation mark, double hyphen, whatever the comment is supposed to be, double hyphen, and the right angle bracket. So the reason why I did not actually type this out is because there's no point typing it out all the time. So you just have to use the shortcut on VS Code. And most IDEs, even if you are using other IDEs, using command forward slash or control forward slash on Windows, control forward slash on Windows should basically pop this for you. So right here I'm going to type form layout. This doesn't actually show. Yeah, so if you're a bit confused, comments don't show on the page. They are just for readability purposes. So when someone looks at this code, even if it's yourself, you know exactly what it does. So this is our form layout, and if we head back to our structuring here, this is a div, and the next layout here, the next element in the layout is the form, right? So we are going to use the form tag, and inside the div tag here we are going to have form. Form is it has form. The form tag has an opening and a closing tag. Form, and we are going to have first name in our form. The form basically we use it to collect data from users. We'll have first name, last name, email, password, and we'll have remember me or something. Let me think of a checkbox. Accept terms and conditions. We all accept terms and conditions without reading them. So terms and conditions, we'll have gender. Gender will be a radio button, which I'm going to show here. We'll have gender. Let me think of another data that you might collect from users that has a different type. We'll have something like country of origin, right? I'm using country, I'm not using state because there might be people not watching from Nigeria, so I'll use country so it's a bit more generic. Country. Let me think of another element that we can use. Description, right? So let's just first name, last name, email, password, gender, country, age. Yeah, that's a good one. Date of birth, age, date of birth. However, but I'm actually talking about all these things because it will help us explore most of the input type elements, right? So our first element here is going to be the first name, right? Input is a self-closing tag, so you don't need, like, it basically closes itself, so you use a forward slash and an angle bracket to close it. And the type attribute for this input tag is text, right? There's another attribute that inputs have. I'm sorry, I'm not going into attributes so deeply because I expect that you may have read this in the resources I shared last week, because there are a lot of HTML attributes and for tags, and I can't cover all of them if we need to move as fast as I want us to. So you have to read those up in W3 on the, I think I shared W3 schools, I shared Free Code Camp, I shared Mozilla. So the 3 resources I shared, and I think I shared something else. 3 of them, you actually have to read up on HTML tags, you read up on HTML attributes. I believe some of you that did, you may have already gone through all this. So yeah. So the type of this input is text, and we are going to, let me save this so you see exactly how it looks. So where is our input? It's not, I can't find it. Wait a second. So I'm not sure why it's not showing up. 1 second. Either way, let's debug. That's the thing. Sometimes you'll be writing code and what you expect to happen doesn't happen. In fact, expect it more often than not. Most of the time, what you are working on will not work the way you expect it to. So if something works the first time, that's the happiest path you can ever experience as an engineer, right? Expect it not to work. Like now, we just added an input here, but it's not showing on the page. How do we debug this? This is another lesson. How do we debug this? You've written the code on your IDE and you've gone to the browser, nothing is showing or it's not behaving exactly as expected. You right click. So when you right click on the browser, there's a shortcut for this. I'm just going to show you the long process first before I talk about the shortcut. And I don't want to talk about the shortcut sharp because in different computers, I think there are different shortcuts and I can't remember all of them. When you right click, the browser has what is called a developer tool, right? The developer tool helps developers to debug websites, to help them find errors or understand the structure of their website or the style of their website if they need to make some changes or they need to understand why something is happening. So that's, you can open that up when you click on the inspect option here. So let's start from the beginning. Right click, inspect. When you click on inspect, for some of you that have not actually configured this on your browser, it's in your browser, but the reason why I'm saying configured is going to look a bit different, right? That's what I'm talking about. When you are opening it for the first time, it's going to open up at the bottom of the browser instead of the right side. I prefer it to be on the right. It's kind of more generic to be on the right, but I'm going to show you how you change it. So you can see here, I wish I can zoom this in. 1 second, let me see if I can. Oh, awesome. Okay, so this is large enough. So when you open up the developer tool, there's a menu on the top right, you can see different areas that you can basically put the tool. You can either put it on the left, you can put it at the bottom, you can put it on the right, or you can just make it a separate window, which we will not be doing. So this is how it's going to look like if you're opening it for the first time. Oh, there's our input. I think it's because the page was zoomed out or zoomed in. I don't know what happened, but that's what I was looking for. It's good that it did not show up. At least now I've got to talk about developer tools, right? So if you want it to be on the right side, you just click on this icon here and you see this option. Clicking on it to put it on the right side. You can see here that we have an elements tab, and this basically has our entire page. Mind you, you cannot change code here and it changes on your IDE. It's not possible, right? Whatever you do on the browser remains on the browser. When you reload the page, it goes away. But sometimes, if you just want to experiment, you can use the browser. But just know that when you reload the page, your changes will just disappear. So this is our page here. You can see all the elements lined up and structured on the browser. If I click on the head, you see the title. Click on the body, you see everything that we've written. See our comments in here and the div, the form. Now, one beautiful thing about the browser developer tool is it helps you understand the reach of an element, the bounds of an element. Now, why is this important? It's very, very important because knowing where the bounds, when knowing the bounds of an element, it means you understand how HTML is structured. It basically helps you understand HTML structure. And I'll explain this. Watch. When I hover on the head, anything I hover inside the head tag does not highlight on the browser, on the page, right? There's no highlight on the page. That's because the head has nothing to do with what is showing on the page. The head only has everything to do with what is showing on the tab and whatever describes the page. There are other things that go into the head, like the style and stuff, which we'll get to later. But the moment I hover on the body, you see that it highlights the entire page, showing you that everything you are looking at on the page is in the body. So that's the body that it's basically showing you. If I go below the body, that is, I go inside the body, right, and I hover on the div, you see that it will highlight the div on the page. And if I hover on the form, it will highlight the form. If I hover on the input, it highlights the input. So it's just kind of like it's a tree that goes down, right? So it's called tag nesting. This input is a child of this form. This form is a child of this div, right? So this div is the parent of this form. Basically, you are nesting tags, right? So that's basically what defines the layout of what we are working on here. I'm going to remove the developer tool so we get back to our form. So this here is our input that we added here, right? There's something else I have to introduce that is not in our design. So our design doesn't have what we call labels. We are supposed to have labels up here like this. So instead of having only what you are looking at in here is called a placeholder. you are supposed to have labels also. So because of that, I'm going to modify the structure a bit so it looks more conventional, right? I keep opening that. Give me a second. Let me drag it out, please. Okay, so because of that, I am going to take this out. I'll cut it with Control X or Command X, and I'll put it in a div. A div is a layout tag, right? So don't forget, a div is basically a division tag. So you use it to divide a section of the page and do something in it. But I decided not to use division because it might be confusing. So I'll paste this input back in. So now we have put the input in a div tag. So we want to group things or elements that are associated with that input. That's why I created a div tag. So I'll group those things in one container, right? Or in one container. So in here I will use what is called a label tag. Label, just as the name implies, you use a label tag to label things. When you go to a mall, you see body lotion, right? Each of those items have labels or labels. Some of them, they label them and you see their names and probably their prices. So that's basically what a label is too in HTML. You use it to label elements, right? Labels are usually used in forms. So when you create an input, you label that input so that when someone looks at that input field, they know exactly what it is. Right here, our label is going to be first name, right? Because that's what this input is, right? So first name, save. If we go back to the page, you see the first name here and you see the input. So this is the label and this is the input, right? I'm going to zoom this in a bit again. Okay, so I think it's big enough. Label input. We are going to add another attribute here called placeholder to the input, right? Placeholder. The placeholder attribute shows you whatever I put in the placeholder attribute is what will show in the input before the user types anything. So right here I'm going to type first name. If I go back, you see this is what we typed in, the placeholder. You can't actually remove it because it's basically basically informing the user what to type in. So when you start typing, it goes away, right? But if you don't type anything, that's just what will show up there, the placeholder. And so my brain basically moves to the left side to show the browser. For that, I'm going to move the browser to the left so it's easier for me. I keep making that mistake for some reason. Okay, so now let me quickly inspect this on the browser. Right click, inspect, and now this is why I created the div to group. This is the div we created. Now we have the label inside the div, we have the input inside the div. So I used it to group the input and its label, and that's the structure I'm going to follow for every input field that I will be creating that has a label here. So of course so I'll copy this, copy, Control C or Command C, and I'll paste it, and I'll change a couple of things. Change it to last name because they are basically the same text type inputs, and I'll change this to last name. I'll save, and you can see first name, last name. What we have here is far from the design, of course, because we've not written any CSS. Like I said, HTML helps you structure the web page. CSS will help you design it. So we'll design this later, but right now let's just structure it. It looks kind of weird, but it's fine for now. So we have first name, last name, two input fields. We are how we gonna enter our class. I just have to quickly run through this and try to round up. First name, last name, and we are going to clone this again and create email. So the major difference between the email input and the first name input that I wrote before is the type. So I was talking about input types before when I was structuring that design. Input types, the type here is going to be email. Wherever you are typing using emails, you have to actually put the type as email so that HTML or the page will know that that is what you want this input to receive, an email. So we have the email here. and it basically looks the same. And we are going to have another field called the password. The difference between the password and the other input elements is the type, right? There's an email type, there's a password type. So if I type password here as the type of that input, and I go to the browser and I type something, watch me. When I type in the email, it shows the text, right? But when I type in the password, it hides the text. That's because that's how passwords are supposed to be hidden by default. So the difference, why it's doing this, is because I set the attribute type to password, right? So you might be wondering, okay, you might not be wondering, but yeah, I need to explain. I'm spending a lot of time talking about forms because whatever site you are building, you have to, there's a very high chance that you actually have to use forms on those sites. So it's important to understand the structure of forms and why forms are the way they are, so you can write proper HTML. And that's our password. I'm going to introduce a new form type, a new input field or input tag, input field basically. Sorry. So we talked about, I think we said we're going to add what, gender, right? Gender. That's going to be a radio button. You cannot have two genders at once. You need to have, you have to have one gender. So so the gender here is not going to be an input, it's going to be a radio button, right? So watch what I want to do here. So I want to introduce a new tag called radio, right? Radio is supposed to be self-closing, isn't it? I'm not sure. Let me quickly, right? Let me check. Please give me a second. Let me see mail here. Nope, it's not. It's self-closing. Okay. So why is it not showing up? Radio button. So let me quickly check. Now this is another thing. As much as I've been writing HTML for, this is 2024, right? 18, 19, 20, 7 years. I've been writing HTML for 7 years. Yes, 7 years. But something as simple as a radio button, I actually need to go and check online to confirm that I'm doing it the right way. What does this tell you? It doesn't tell you that I'm dumb. I'm not dumb. It tells you that you are human. As a human being, whatever software you're building, you need to learn how to do research. Research is extremely important as a software engineer. Why? Our brains can take a lot of things, but if you are doing a lot of things, some of them slip off. You can't actually remember everything, right? Sometimes you might remember something, but you might not be using it the right way. You need to confirm how to use it. It's been a while since I used radio buttons. That's the funny thing. So now I have to go and check to see how radio buttons are structured, which is fine, right? So you don't have to beat yourself over it. I'm not teaching you this to cram. I mentioned this in my last class. I'm teaching you to understand. You don't have to remember everything here. The only way you can be good at this is if you do it consistently. So most of the time I advise that people try to write code every day, even if it's just for an hour. That consistent practice just helps you just become better. You become, if you actually try to do this 1 hour every day, and it takes, in a week you spend 7 hours learning HTML or learning CSS, you actually do better than somebody that spends 3 hours once a week or twice a week. Because when they get around doing to do the thing again, it's been so long. Maybe they did it 3 days or 4 days ago. Someone that is learning you cannot be giving yourself that much gap, because you are going to forget. So it's good to do it every day, right? So back to our radio thing. So I'm going to Google radio button, right? And W3 Schools has basically everything you need. It's kind of like a tutorial or a book for HTML. So HTML input type radio. Oh, it's an input type. So it's not a tag. it's an input tag. It's not a read. There's no radio tag. So type radio. Okay. I was very wrong. This is what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Okay, so I'm going to introduce a new attribute called name. We are going to give our radio button a name. You are supposed to give all your inputs a name so that when you submit the form, the data or whatever the value that is typed in is associated to that input using the name. So the name is basically supposed to the name basically maps the field to its value, right? So because of that, I'm going to add name here, the name attributes for all of them. First name, last name, email, name, password. So the name here is going to be gender, and I'm going to do this. So we have gender, value male. Let me see. Doesn't matter. Okay, so value attribute. Sorry, I introduced it without saying anything. The value attribute basically you use the value attribute to give a value to an input, to give a default value to an input. So just like the first name attribute, you don't necessarily need to give it a value because the user, whatever the user types in becomes the value. But for the gender, since each of these radio buttons are they are supposed to hold single values, right? So you type in the value as the default. Exactly. So this radio button is going to be a bit weird because each of the inputs need a label, right? You've seen that I've added 3 radio buttons, but they showed up as just 3 circles, no labels. So these will not know what to click on or what you expect them to click on, right? So because of that, we are going to restructure this field. So it will group the label and the input in one div, just like that for each of the radio buttons. But let's quickly give them values. Male value here will be female, and value here will be, let's say, order. Yeah. So I'm going to put this in a div, and I'm going to give it a label called male. So I'll quickly save this and show you why we needed to group this like this. We needed to group the label and the input in a div. So you can see here gender, and this is male. The remaining 2 circles are just there. You don't know what they are, so you have to give them labels. So you can either put the label before or after the input. So I'm going to put it after the input so you see the difference. I'll not save it yet. This is how it looks before the label, before the radio button input. If I save now, you'll see it after the radio button input. I think this looks better, so I'm gonna leave it there after the radio button input. I'll just copy this. I think I can clear this. I'll bring them back. So here we have male, female, and order, right? Female, order. Okay, so we have our gender here. We have the first name, last name, email, password, gender. So now there's something I have to tell you. You might be wondering why I give all the genders the same name, all the gender types the same name. It's because a radio button, no matter how many radio buttons you have, if they are supposed to be associated with one value, if they are supposed to have one value, you need to give them the same name. And I'll show you why. If I change this name to gender 2 and I change this one to gender 3, if I save and I click on male, I can click on female and I can click on other. So you can select 3 of them at once, which defeats the purpose of a radio button. A radio button is supposed to, it's basically a list of options that is not too long, because if the list of options becomes too long, then you use something called a select. But if the list of options are not too long, like gender, for example, gender is a short list generally, right? So if the list of options is not too long, you use a radio button. But at the end of the day, the value is supposed to be one value, not 3 values. Now, what I've selected will give me 3 values, but 1 value. That's what you are expecting. So each of the radio button items are supposed to have the same name, right? Some people get a bit confused about this, especially when they are starting HTML. So it's important to understand it now. A radio button, all the radio button inputs are supposed to have the same name as far as they are associated together and you expect a single value. If you want multiple values, you don't use a radio button, use something called a checkbox, which we'll get to at the end of this. So I'll change the name. So if they have the same name, HTML will know that you are expecting a single value. So when you click on one, like male, for example, and you now click on other, it will remove the select from name and put it in order, because that's what you've clicked on. If you click on female, it moves it just like that because they have the same name. So that's the gender. Let me quickly look at, let me see. So I forgot to mention, the comments are open now. If you have questions, start typing them there right now, because after this I'm going to get to that and I'll just answer your questions. So I was able to fix the comments. Turns out it was a setting that I did not turn on. So you can add comments if you have questions. There are live comments. You just add the comment and I'll look at it. For now, I'm going to go to the live and see whether I have anyone on here, because I've been talking. I don't even know if anybody's on is in this class, but it doesn't matter because I'm actually going to share this video later. Yeah, so let me also see if anybody has left comments here for me. Boom. Okay, I have. Okay, I see. Awesome. Okay, it's good. We have 2 users, 2 viewers. You can add comments here in the chat. So when you add comments in the chat here, I'll actually see what you've typed in and I can answer your question. Because we are running out of time, if you have a question, it's best to add it there right now, so that when I just switch back, I know that I'm answering questions straight away. Okay, so that's the gender. So we'll add. Now, there's another one good thing with the ID is you can actually wrap tags. If your code gets too long and you don't want to deal with scrolling all the way down, you can wrap a tag and it will wrap all its contents. So it basically gives you a cleaner view. So if you hover towards the number of the line, you see this arrow. You click on it, it wraps the entire tag. You see, so it will wrap, and all the children in that tag will just be collapsed, be wrapped, right? Collapsed. I think collapsed is the right word too. Yeah, clicking on the arrow again will expand it. Clicking on it again will basically collapse it. So that's the gender. We talked about gender. We talked about country, right? So country. So the country is a relative country is a long list. There are a lot of countries in the world. So you will not use a radio button. You use what is called a select. Select is a tag on its own. So we'll use a select tag, right? But first off, we'll have to create our div. So we have div, we'll have the label, then we have the select, right? So div label country, and then we are going to use the select tag. The select tag takes in options. So select tag takes in option. You cannot put a p tag in a select. If you put any other thing inside a select tag, it will not work. You need to put only options in a select tag, because that's what a select tag is supposed to be concerned with, the options that it's supposed to show you, right? So I'm going to type in a couple of options here. Option. So the option tag is what you use to put an option, to basically add an option to a select input. So let me type a couple of countries. Nigeria, for example. I just basically Control C and Control V this entire thing. So I'll just type in the names. Ghana, United States, China, India, England, France. So now we've added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options. The select can take as many options as possible, right? So that's the purpose of select. So for you to have a lot of, if you have a lot of options, then use the select tag. So I'm going to save this and open the browser so you see exactly how it looks like. So this is the country here, the country that we just country input. This is the select. So clicking on the select here basically shows you a bunch of options, and when you click on the option, it selects it, right? So that's what the select tag does. I'm just quickly brushing through these elements. The best way for you to learn is to go back and practice, not only with my video, right? That's why I share these resources. When you go back, you've watched my video. For some of you that have joined this live, good for you. Some that will watch this video later, still good. Watch my video. My video points you to where you're supposed to learn. My video will try to teach you a bit, but at the end of the day, the actual learning is done by you. I just try to basically point, right? So if you go back and you practice these input elements and selects and forms with and then you use this W3 schools as a guide, you can see here on W3 schools, all the tags are here on W3 schools. The doc type, HTML, blah, 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 the body tag, the button tag. There are tags here that I've not even mentioned. They are all here. You can practice. It just takes understanding, right? It will not take as long as you think. That's all I can say. It will not take as long as you think. All it takes is for you to put the time and practice. That's what will help you. This video just doesn't even take you far like that. It just kind of introduces you to the concept. Okay, so we've talked about country. We've added country to our form. We are going to add, so far, let me quickly just a quick recap of what we've done. And I'm looking at the time too. Let me see if I have any questions first. If I don't have any question, then I'll know how to move. No questions yet. Okay. So we've talked about the input tag of type text, where we added our first name, our last name. We've talked about the email, which is input type email. We've added the email. Input type password, we've added the password. Input type radio, we've added the radio buttons for gender, male, female, others. We've talked about label tag, we've talked about the select tag, we've talked about developer tools. So we've actually covered a lot, honestly. So we've talked about the option in the select. I'm going to quickly rush this so we finish our form, and yeah, as fast as I can actually. So okay, yeah, so we want to add, we've added all these inputs. We want to add, what's the next thing? Date of birth, right? So let's add date of birth. That's where we are going to use a calendar. Date of birth. So I've created a div. I'm going to create a comment here so that it's clear. Date of birth, and I've created a div, right? And that's going to have a label, date of birth, not label, my bad. And we are going to use the input tag. Input, I forgot something here. The select also needs a name. So the select element takes in name, but it doesn't take in type because there's only one type of select. There's multi-select too, but it's not type that you use. and that's not really ideal to use. There are things that there are libraries that you can use to achieve that later down the line. We'll get to that. So the name here, I'm just going to type country. Back to what I was doing. The option doesn't take name. The option kind of takes value if you want to use a different value from what is here. If you don't pass a value option attribute to the option tag, it will pick whatever is here. But if you want something like nga, a different value from what is showing on the screen, then you can use the value tag. Back to our date of birth. So the input tag, name, date of birth, date. I'm going to use what is called underscore. You are not supposed to use, you can use if you want, but like it's not proper for you to use spaces in your input tag names, in your input names, right? So, and I'll use underscore, date of birth, underscore to kind of separate the words. And the type for this input, since we want a calendar, right, the type is going to be date. So the type here will be date. Now, if you use the type date for input, it's going to open up a calendar for you. HTML has a default calendar, right? You can style the calendar later if you want, which is hard to do, mind you. So if you use the type date, it's going to present you with the calendar. Click on the icon, it will open up the calendar for you. You can basically go to any year available to typical calendars that you know, and you selecting a value from this calendar. I'll select 25th of December 2024. I was not born on that date, but here you go. It will automatically fill the values for you, and you can actually select any of them and change it. So if I want this to be 1985, there you go, it changes the value. And if you click on the icon, you'll see that it will take me to that same year that I typed in. So that's the calendar. So to get that calendar, you need to use type date, right, for input. And then we are going to have, like, let's say height, or let's not use height, let's say weight in kilograms, whatever. So there we are going to use what is called a number field, right? I'm just rushing through this actually. So I'm going to type in the div label weight, input name is weight. If you are wondering, I've been using lower cases for the name of inputs, which is actually a good way. It's a standard. It's just a standard. People don't use uppercase for their input names. You can use uppercase, nobody will stop you, but just following standard, I'm using lower cases, right? Name, the type here for our weight input is going to be number. Gives you an input field that only takes in numbers, right? So it's not like anybody's going to have weight that has a letter in it. It's not possible, right? So this weight will be in kg. So if we go back to our form, we have weight kg, and it's a number. I cannot type. You can see I'm actually trying to type here, right? But I can't type any other thing apart from numbers, right? So it takes in numbers. You can set the limit, you can set the maximum, the minimum, and all those things. I'll just quickly do that. Let's say I'll set the minimum here. Mean, you use the mean attribute. Mean, I'll set mean to, let's say, 5, right? I don't know if there's no human being on earth apart from babies that are below 5 kg. And max, I'll set the max to 150. Hopefully there are people that are heavier than that, yeah. But so you can see, you can also use these arrows to increase or decrease the numbers. But if I type 4, it will not stop me, mind you. But when I try to submit the form, it will reject the value. So when we try to submit the form, you see that it will reject this value, and it will allow me to type more than 150, of course. But I'm just trying to explain my point here. I don't think I want to set the min and max for width, so I'll just let it be like this. Okay, so wait, let me check if I have any questions yet. No questions. Okay, that's good. For if you are watching this video, if you are not in this live class, it's fine. You can leave your questions as a comment in the video when I post it later. So you can leave your questions in the comments. I'll get to those comments and answer the questions you have. I'm also going to add a checkbox input called accept terms terms and conditions. Let me think of something else that has more meaning, right? What's something that could be associated with a user? Can't think of anything right now. I'll just use terms and conditions, right? I'll just use terms and conditions. Terms and conditions. So terms, I'll say something, I'll make it a question. Do you accept our terms and conditions? Question mark. I'm going to put this after the input. Remember in our radio button, we put label, we put input, then label. So that's what I'm going to do here, because what we are using, you see, input label in this radio button. What the input we are creating here is called a checkbox. So it's kind of like a radio button, but it allows you to pass multiple values. I think down the line when we start building sites, I'll use checkbox with that accepts multiple values, checkboxes, so that you see how it's used. So input terms, the name is, I'll type terms and conditions, and then for the type I'll use, mind you, checkbox. So type checkbox. Remember, the other input that takes in one value is type radio. This one that takes in multiple values, so you can click as many checkboxes as you wish, is of type checkbox, and you'll see the difference. So do you accept our terms and conditions? Type checkbox. I've saved it. So you see the difference between radio button and checkbox, right? Radio takes in a single value, it's circular. Checkboxes are basically squares, and they take, if you click on the checkbox, it ticks it. You can have as many checkboxes as you wish that are basically mapped to the same value or name, right? So I'm thinking of, let me say the question was favorite football clubs, and you have Manchester United, you have Chelsea, you have Barcelona, you have Real Madrid as options. You can select Real Madrid, Barcelona, you can select all of them, and they'll all be mapped to the same input, right? I think I should add that. For the sake of time, I'll not be able to. We are just basically a bit above 7 o'clock W18. So we have, I think at this point our form is done. We have, let me zoom out a bit so we will see the entire form. Okay, so we have first name, last name, email, password, gender, country. This is an input of type text, input of type email, input of type password, input of type radio, and then we have a select tag with options: Nigeria, Ghana, United States, blah blah blah. Then we have a date of birth field, which is an input of type date. So you click on this, opens up the calendar. Then we have weight, which is of input type number, and then we have the checkbox, right? So I forgot to add a placeholder here. The number field can take in a placeholder, so I'm going to type placeholder here. So the placeholder attribute, you can type in weight here. You see, it's up. So we have our basic form. We are missing something. What we are missing is the button, the submit button, right? So let's add the button. The button doesn't necessarily need to be in a div because it doesn't have a label, so you don't have to group it together with something else. So it's just a button. It's to be on its own. You don't have to put it in a div. So I'll type the button here. I talked about the button tag in our last class. Whatever you type inside the button tag will be what will be shown. That will basically what will show in the button. So I'm going to type register here inside the button tag, and we have register, right? So we have our basic form structure. When we talk about CSS, I'm not going to talk about CSS today because we don't have time, but CSS will be the major topic in my next class, which would be, it will not be next weekend because of the holidays. So I think this will be the last class for the year, unfortunately. But I don't think I would jump and conclude. Let me look at my calendar first and then I'll decide. So today is 21st. Next week Saturday is 28th, which basically falls in the holiday period. So I'll skip next week because of the holidays. Our next class will be on the 4th of January 2025. So this will be the last class for the year. So yeah, I just thought I should mention that if you have watched to this point of the video, so, and for those of you that are live, yeah, so our next class will be on the 4th of January, which is a Saturday, 2 weeks from today. There I'll talk about CSS, but I'll not talk about CSS today because of time. I'm talking really fast because I want to cover a lot of things. So just let me drink water. I feel a bit thirsty. I'm thirsty. So talking about a lot of things. Okay. Now, we've added our button, so we have our form. Let's give our form like a title, just like this one does. Registration form. Let's add that to our form. So we are going to use. This thing has just moved around a bit. Okay, so we are going to use a heading tag up top here before our form, right? Before our form, we will just add. Should we do it before or after, or inside our form? Let's look at our design again. So looking at this design, this registration form seems to be inside the card here, and I think if we want our card to be, it seems to be inside the card. Let me think about this for a second. I think we can make it. Okay, this is what we are going to do, right? Instead of wrapping this entire thing, so this here, let me quickly undo this entire thing, right? It's just a mess. So I want to change the structure of this design a bit, so that's why I'm taking this out. So this card is going to be a div. This is going to be a div tag, right? Now from here, sorry, let me use, can I use a shape? I think I should be able to. This thing is just crazy. You know what, let me get back to this so we don't waste too much time. From here, after the registration form text, down to the bottom here, we will use, this will be our form, right? So this will be our form. Okay, and then this area, we will use a h2 tag. Header 2 is what we are going to use here. We can use any one. We can use header 3, header 4, header 5. I want to use header 2. It's my choice. So if you are doing this, you can use any one you want. So I've basically changed the structure a bit. So we have our form outside. We have our h2 outside our form, but both of them are in the same div. So that's exactly what we want to go and do now. So we have div 1, div 2, h2, and then form. Clear? Good. So I'm going to wrap this form. I talked about wrapping a couple of minutes ago. I'll wrap this form, I'll cut it, and I'll create a div. So this is div 1, right? And div 2, this div here, the second div, is what I just created. So div 2, and then I'm going to put our form back. So let me scroll up. So we have the first div that will basically be this blue purple background thing. the second div, which is this card that will have the form inside, and then we have the form, which is after the registration text. We have from here down here is our form. So up top, before the form, I'm going to add our h2 that we just talked about now, h2, and we'll type registration form. Right, so we have background, purple blue background gradient thing, the card, we have our title, and we have our form. Right, so what we've done today, we basically structured a form. Right, we've structured a form. So this is, let me get back to, sorry, so I've saved this, and you see our title here, registration form, the input field. Right, this title is too big, so I'm going to use h3. So because h3 is smaller than h2, the title is just massive, it's covering everywhere. So I'm going to change this to h3. So it's h3 tag that we will use instead of h2. You can see it's a bit smaller than the previous one. So this is h3. Right, yeah, back to our design. So we have registration form, first name, last name, email, password, gender, country, date of birth, weight, terms and conditions, and a button click called register. I want to add something else, as basically this is what we will use to round up this class, and I want you guys to pay attention because this is really important. I'll be using the anchor tag for the first time. I've already talked about it before, but I'm going to be using it here so it will make sense to you. So I'm going to I'll rename this file. Right clicking on the file on VS Code will give you a list of options, and rename is one of those options. Rename this file to register.html, and I'm going to create a new file called login.html. I'm going to create another file called profile.html. So I've created two files, login.html, profile.html, register.html is where we've been working on. So I renamed index.html to register.html. If you are following this, then I'm just basically saying this out loud so you understand what I have done. Register.html and login profile. So what we are going to do is, I'm going to, before our next class, right, since I didn't have the time to do it here, before our next class, I am going to write the login form. It will just be a copy of this form, but with email and password. So I'm going to write the login form with the same structure, and I'm going to write the profile, but the profile will just have your name. It will have a bunch of images, your name and your gallery. So right now, I think what we are working on has transformed to a website where people upload images and videos, images and videos. So this just came to my head now, so I did not plan for this. But since we've worked on the registration form, we work on the login and the profile. I'll do those myself. In our next class, I'll talk about them, and then we'll start CSS. So why I decided to create this is because I want to link the registration page to the login page so that you see how the anchor tag works. So you can you'll be able to use it on your own to link one page to another. Right, so right now nothing is showing up here because index.html does not exist again. I'll change it to register, since we've changed it to register.html, and I'll zoom in so it's clear. Okay, so I'm going to quickly create the basic boilerplate HTML for our login form so that when we go to the page, it will be visible to us. We'll know where we have gone to. I'll just copy this. You don't have to do that because I'm still going to talk about the login form later in our next class, but I just want to show you how the anchor tag works. I'm not going to copy the form. I'll copy everything apart from the form. Right, copy everything apart from the form, and I'll change this to login. I'll change this to login form. Okay, so we have done that. Nothing will show here because we are on the registration page, but if we go to the login page, I changed registration to login on the browser URL tab. So this is what we have on the login page. Right, so this is what I want to do on the registration. After the form, right after the form. I want to add something at the bottom after the form. It's going to be an anchor tag, and this is what is going to be the content. The content will be okay, relax, don't be confused. This is what I want to do, right? I wanted to use a paragraph tag first before the anchor tag, and you'll see why. So I'll take out this anchor tag, and let me zoom in a bit. I'll take out this anchor tag and I'll use the paragraph tag first, and I'll say have an account login, right? You know, when you go to websites and you want to register, and on the registration form you see this notice at the bottom say asking if you have an account, and then it takes you to the login page if you click on the login link. So that's what we want to do here now. I'll save this. At the bottom you see have an account login, but you cannot click on it yet. That's why I took out the anchor tag. I just wanted to use the paragraph tag to show this first. Now, we don't want this entire text to be clickable. We only want the login text to be clickable. So that's the only text that we will put inside the anchor tag. Do you understand? Whatever you put inside an anchor tag will be clickable. And when you put the href attribute, it will take you to a link, whatever link you type in there. And I'm going to illustrate that now, right? So since we want only the login text to be clickable, I'm going to cut it, and I'll wrap it in an anchor tag, which is the A tag. It's not going to be clickable yet, of course, but because we've not put href, we have to put the href attribute for it to have a basically a reference, a link, for you to be able to link it to another place, whether it's google.com, whether it's youtube.com. Here in this case is login page. You need to put the link of the login page, so that when you click on it, it will know where you want it to go to. You understand? So it's not going to be clickable, it's just the same thing. But the moment I come here and I add, mind you, watch, href equal to, we want to go to what? We want to go to login.html. I just have to type login.html, and it will know that that is where I want to go to. When I save this and go back to the browser, you will see that the login page will change from black to blue. Blue showing that it's a link. Do you understand? When you write CSS, you can style the color, you can change the color if you want, you can do whatever you want with it, but by default HTML will underline it and make it blue. So you can see here, it's when you have visited that page, it will not show blue, it will show like violet or purple, but it's showing violet pop or slash purple because I visited the page before. Remember, we went to the login page for me to show you the title, right? So you can see have an account login. You cannot click on have an account because we did not put it in the anchor tag. What we put in the anchor tag is the login. So if you click on this login, it will take you to the login page. And if you look at the bottom left of the browser, I am just hovering on the text, and you'll see the link that it will take me to blah 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 slash login.html. If I click on it, boom, login page. It takes me to the login page. I'll go back and I'll do it again. So if I come back and I click on it, it takes me to the login page. You can see here it's the login page. So there are a lot of ways you can use this tag, but this is the simplest way you can use it. You can put it in an image. You can put an image in the anchor tag. You can do a lot of things with it. But right now, that's not what we are doing. I'm just introducing you to it, and it's best to understand how it works. So using the href, and whatever you put in the href, it will take you to that. I think I talked about this in our last class when I used youtube.com. So if I put youtube.com here now, youtube.com, when I click on this login, it will take me to youtube.com. You see, it has changed to blue because I'm not gone to youtube.com. There's a problem here actually, which I'm going to talk about. So if you don't type the protocol of where you want it to go to, if it's a different website, it will think it's the same website. So it will think youtube.com is a file like login.html. So if you look at the link here, you'll see the domain, the port, and then slash youtube.com, which is wrong. because youtube.com is another website. So I'm going to type in the protocol, which is https colon double slash youtube.com. That way it knows that you want to go to a different website. You can see that at the bottom it's not showing our own domain, which is the local 123.127.0.0. It's showing https youtube.com. Clicking on this takes me straight to youtube.com. So that's how the anchor tag works. I hope you understand it. A lot of people confuse, get the anchor tag wrong, so I had to spend a lot of time explaining it. So yeah, so we've basically built our login page and we have everything we need. I'm going to take this back to login.html. So yeah, I think we've come to the end of this class. I'm going to quickly look to see if I have any questions from any of you. And if you can't think of any question, don't worry. Even if I did not mention that, if maybe you stumbled on something on the internet, or while you were reading up on W3 schools or on Free Code Camp, you saw something that wasn't really clear and you need me to explain, make sure you leave a comment under this video. I'm going to get to that comment and answer your question. Since I have not created like a Discord or a group yet on Telegram or WhatsApp for any of us, but before I do that, YouTube is the best way for you to reach out to me to ask questions. Any of the videos, whether it's this video or any of the shorts that I've been posting, just somebody asked a question a couple of days ago, so just leave a comment, ask any question you wish, as far as it has something to do with what I've been teaching you or anything generally in tech. I'll be able to answer that question if I have an answer to it, of course. So thank you for joining, those of you that joined, and if you've watched the video to this point, it's good. So I'll advise that you guys practice this by reading up on the internet, the links that I've shared. Will I share a new resource? The resources I shared still cover everything I've talked about, so I'm not going to leave any resource in the description of this video, but I'm going to, I think I've talked about our next class, which is next year on the 4th of January. I'm also going to remind everybody, so but just have that at the back of your mind. Yeah, so we've come to the end of this class. Let me quickly look at the chat to see if I have any comments. Okay, I've seen that somebody left a comment, but it's not a question. So yeah, good talk. So that's the end of this class. I will see you guys next year. I wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in advance. Cheers. Yeah.
What airline did you use for Madrid flights?